host ask her to try again because now we're on air. Hopefully she can find us. At least we know she's trying to come. That's a plus. That's a plus. I feel like this has been hard all semester for us to get together, and it's just been kind of tricky.
Yeah.
I'm glad this time worked though for everyone, it seems like. So
Yeah.
Right. That's good.
But it's definitely nice that they could have been done through PowerPoint too, because that was just nice.
Yeah.
That
That seemed to work for people to come on at different times.
Yeah.
But this one does not work that way. Oh boy.
So this is just a random question since we're all, like we're here. But so for the one where it's saying the part one basically, or not part one, the one where we have to describe the intervention assignment, but it's saying if our partner's there. But since we all did it as a group, are we just like, for you guys, did you guys just say like, well, I kind of did like this section, and so like this is what I found, since we weren't really like partners, it was all kind of like a group.
Right.
So like, is that kind of like how you guys are doing it? Like, I did this part, like I focused on the challenges of intervention and then kind of like report that to you guys, since like, is that kind of what you guys are planning on doing? I guess.
Yeah, I wondered if we just even wanted to just go through the PowerPoint and sorry, I'm trying to reply to her again with the link again to see if it works better. So I can't talk and put it in at the same time.
Yeah.
What was I saying now? So I wondered if we just want to go through the PowerPoint and go like slide through slide, and everybody that did that slide, whoever did that slide talks about it. And then we move to the next slide and we just talk about it as we go through. Would that work?
Yeah, I mean, that works for me. I
If
guess.
anybody has a better idea, if we have another idea, great. That's the only thing I thought of.
So are we talking, I'm just confused, sorry. Are we talking about the PowerPoint that we did? I'm so lost.
Yeah, the PowerPoint about
physical.
Yeah, the physical domain.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we just did last week, I feel like.
Do we have to talk about that one? Hold on. Let me just read something and then I'll figure out where I'm confused on this. There's so many pages of instructions on LTOs that I feel like it's so hard to keep track, because I'm like, where are we right now? I have no clue. So
it's on if you want to know where to look, or where I'm looking, it's the lesson 13 intervention convention HOA section. So it's in the ponder and prove of lesson 13.
Okay, and it's like part 1 before the convention, part 2. Like
yeah,
those?
and so I'm finding it in part 2. It's like the first bullet point when it breaks into bullet points, saying briefly describe your physical or cognitive domain. Intervention assignment in part 2.
Oh, from lessons 12 and 11. Oh, okay. I didn't know that at all, so that's cool. That's good to know. I didn't know that we were doing that. That's good. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That'll be helpful to know.
Yeah, I didn't know that we had to present that. I thought we just had to turn it in and we were done with it. So
yeah, I didn't realize till I read through it again too. But.
Yeah. It's interesting because we didn't do it in partners. We did it as a whole group. So it's like we all kind of know what we did.
Yeah. Kind of backwards, but okay. We'll do it.
That's what I thought, if we just talk through each slide, because we all kind of did those on our own and then just bring it all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
She says she's still having a hard time. I'm not sure what to tell her.
Yeah, I don't know what else.
It says she joined.
Oh, yeah. We see her. Okay, we're good.
Oh, yay. There you are, Sarah.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Whoa, where'd my picture go? There it is.
We lost Sarah? Maybe?
Is it back?
We can hear you, but just not see you.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can see you and sometimes we can't.
Oh, brother. I was trying because my computer is very slow. There we go. Oh, my mic. But I guess. There we go.
Oh, I think her connection is slow or something.
Yeah.
Bummer. We see you again. Okay. Did we dare start? Are you there, Sarah?
Mhm.
All right.
So we needed somebody to run it and somebody to time it. Who wants to do what?
Yeah.
I can time it for us.
I can moderate it. I can kind of move the
Awesome.
discussion.
Sounds good.
Okay. Oh, I should probably, if I'm going to do that, I should probably get the
Alright, just tell me.
Okay. So, okay, sorry, I'm just trying to get the PowerPoint up so we can kind of go through that.
Yeah.
Sarah, since you figures it out because I've been there. I've had that happen before. Since you weren't here, we kind of talked about in part 2. One of the first things that we kind of have to do is talk about the intervention convention assignment that we just did last week. So that physical domain PowerPoint that we just made. So we kind of have to discuss it, but it's supposed to be like kind of as partners. But since we did it as a group, we figured we would just go through the slides, and then when we get to your slide that you did, you just kind of give the little 2-minute synopsis of it and that stuff. So if you want to get to the PowerPoint, that way we all kind of know where we're at.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Started.
Okay, I guess I did the first couple, so I can talk about those. Well, the title slide is kind of just that, an introduction to what we were designing, which was an intervention and prevention guide for parents with children ages 2 to 5 that are suffering from childhood obesity. And then on the first slide, we just kind of outlined what childhood obesity is, defined it, gave some statistics, talked about how it affects more than 30% of children in the United States, that more and more children are being diagnosed with diabetes, hypertension, and other comorbid conditions that are associated with obesity. And then kind of like the criteria for when a child is considered that, and that's when their body mass index is greater than 95%. And then my last slide that I did was about the problems that obesity creates, that it can cause. And so it's just a little picture, I guess you guys can see it, of obesity, and then it has like just all of the things that can lead to, like type 2 diabetes, cancer, put you at a higher risk for cancer, mood disorders, heart disease, liver disease, those kind of things. So those were mine.
Wonderful. Okay, I have this next slide. Talked about how to intervene with exercise and nutrition, and had some good quotes there. Talked about lack of physical exercise contributes to a child's likelihood to be obese, while a program of exercise can reverse an unhealthy lifestyle. As society, we're becoming more sedentary, and we're still eating more food. So our caloric inputs are growing while our outputs are shrinking. And I think we all see that in our lives as well as the kids. The solution is for kids to go out and play more and encourage healthy eating habits.
Okay, so I kind of cut in after her with the challenges of intervention. And so I actually kind of found it interesting how many challenges there can be for intervening. I kind of thought maybe I would get like 3 or 4, but then kind of once I started thinking about it, the ball got rolling, and then I got all of those, and I thought it was just really kind of interesting, and also just kind of like disheartening just how many challenges there can be. And so I kind of found that the challenges seemed to be for both like parents and kids. It wasn't just for like parents, or like just the kids weren't what was facing the challenge of it. So like, for example, I found that a parent's challenge was that their kid was a picky eater. And so it's hard for the parent to try and encourage their child to eat better because the child won't touch the food. And then the kid has to deal with the challenge of lack of support and encouragement from parents, because they're 2 to 5-year-olds, which we chose to focus on. And so they're not going to really know any better without the help of their parents. So then the next slide, which is like the time and money. So I'm going to kind of combine the two. I found it really interesting. I found this one study kind of specifically focusing on money. And they did like a study trying to figure out the likelihood of parents to buy like fast food. And so this one discovery that I found really surprising was that if a parent had seen an ad within 24 hours of kind of passing by a fast food restaurant, and the child, like either the child asking to get it or just the parent being like, oh, like, interesting, I saw an ad for that. If they had seen an ad within 24 hours, they were more likely to buy it by 34%. And I thought that that was really interesting, because it just really kind of shows the impact that ads can have on people and how it can tempt people to buy products that they normally wouldn't buy. So then to go down to slide 8 of overcoming challenges. Sorry, I kind of skipped a slide, but you know. And so the overcoming challenges, I would definitely say that meal prep, because that helps with time and money. Although it may seem like you're spending a lot of money at one time, it definitely will pay off, because then you won't be spending money over 5 days where it would just be one day. And then you could save the money over those other 4 days to meet your 5-day quota. And then like going to farmers market and getting the better quality food for your money, and even possibly spending less, because the farmers markets tend not to have so many pesticides and the bad things in it and processed as the grocery stores. And so I feel like those were definitely things that could help overcome the challenges.
Awesome.
Agreed, yeah.
I had a slide. I talked about how we can incorporate physical activity in these young kids' lives. I'm a preschool teacher, so I had fun finding the activities at preschool and the activities at home when with family. And there's just lots of fun things. I know in our preschool, I have the kids have exercise time for 15 minutes. And one child, they all take turns. One child gets a turn every day to choose what exercises we're doing. And I found a lot more that I haven't done before. So I was interested in making that list to help me. And I want to help my kids get out and do stuff more too, at home with my family. I want to make that a goal. So it was really fun to find all the different fun exercises you can do with them. It doesn't have to be, oh, let's go out and do push-ups, the whole time. It doesn't have to be boring. It can be fun.
Yeah. So I did my slides on nutrition, and it just talked about like I came up with or I researched or whatever the different like recommendations that they have for children at about like that age, and it's just like they should eat their fruits and vegetables pretty much. But they said like 2 to 5-year-olds should grow about 2.5 inches and gain about 5 pounds every year. But that also like varies within children. Like obviously like some children are just really, really skinny and some of them are larger. It just kind of depends. But their caloric intake should be about like 1,000 to 1,400 calories, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know that. And then one thing also that I found that was interesting was in that article called The Development of Childhood Dietary Preferences. It talked about how like children, because they eat, or I guess like you don't have to, I mean, I guess it's good to have like a balanced meal, obviously, but you can think about the way young children eat in a more like cohesive way, like throughout the week, I guess. Because sometimes like they'll go through the whole day and they'll eat like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I don't know. But as long as they're kind of getting like a balance throughout a couple of days, they'll be fine. So it says like a balanced combination of foods from these food groups should be offered and judged over the week rather than day to day. I think that's also has to do with like adults eat like larger meals, I guess. We have more calories to consume, whereas children have less. That's just my thought, maybe. And then I like this quote. It said, "The food fed to infants and young children not only determines their health in childhood, but also protects the food that they eat later in life," which I thought was really true because it's like the way that you were raised and the foods that your parents gave you, it's really hard to break that mold sometimes. So parents do, like they said, you guys said in like the earlier slides, like especially young children, like they're not going to go to the grocery store and buy their own food, and they don't know any different to like ask for different food a lot of times. So like parents really have like a large responsibility in that. So different things that like parents can do and people in the community, they can increase food literacy. And I read an article about this and then I lost it and I couldn't find it again, but it's basically just talking about like where food comes from, like the nutrition, like the nutritional value of different foods, and just educating children on like how food is important to help their bodies grow and what good foods can they eat and what foods to kind of moderate or avoid, which I thought was interesting and helpful. And then like small lifestyle changes and the consistency of those, trying new foods. I took an infant class last semester, I think, and they talked about how you have to like, you can incorporate new foods like 6 times before a child may like it or not like it, you know, because they're just, I don't know. I don't remember the reason why, but you can try it a lot. And then we can make like healthy lunches, encourage community creation of healthy school lunch programs, which I thought was a really good one. And then there's like a lot of nutrition education in communities, some communities, and you can take advantage of those. And then there's also like resources for people that don't have enough food, which are like WIC or SNAP. And then like the government also like has nutritional education, I guess. And then family meals can help make healthy choices as well. Yeah.
Alrighty. So yeah, I really liked our presentation. I really thought we all did a really good job on it. So good job, guys. It was really, really nice. And I thought it was really kind of interesting to learn about because it's like, I feel like it is something talked about a lot, but just to really kind of delve into it a little bit more, I really thought that was cool. Alrighty. So we're going to move on to the next step of describing the social emotional domain intervention we researched this week. And then we're going to talk about if we've actually implemented the intervention personally, or discuss the research on the effectiveness of the intervention. So is there anybody that wants to start, or I can start?
Either way. I can.
Alrighty.
Do you want to?
No, you can go ahead if you wanted to. Go ahead.
Either way. Are we still focusing on that young 2 to 5 mostly? Is that the plan? Or just the whole group? What do you think? Does it matter? Because mine kind of covers both. Mine kind of covers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it really mattered. It didn't say keep in your group or anything.
All right. So I was focusing on media and how sometimes that can be in the excess, or it can also be inappropriate media for children, and how that affects them and how to deal with that. So I was just some ideas I had on my own even before I researched it. I thought of it takes time away from playing and experiencing real life. Lots of times there's inaccurate depictions of life that they just don't understand how things really are if they're spending all their time just on media. There's pornography everywhere. If they even accidentally come across it, it's huge. It's such a huge impact on their life. Even when they're tiny, they can accidentally come across it, and it's so sad. Another thing, like with social media, especially as they get older, you're dealing with bullying and depression, unrealistic expectations. But I think the biggest thing with the younger group is just that too much screen time takes away from other activities. Some of the studies I was reading about children in low-income families especially have an increased media exposure. And when they have that increased media exposure, it limits things like reading aloud and teaching. The kids sit and watch cartoons instead of doing those learning activities with their parents. And it's a huge thing. Another study said that we learn that American children on average watch double the amount of TV that experts recommend. Double, that's huge. They talked about how heavy media exposure can be a problem with increased risk of obesity. That was one thing we talked about in our thing. Increased risk as they get older in things like smoking, sex, drug, alcohol abuse, attention problems, and poor grades. They said the answer lies not with government censorship, but with vigilant parents. I think parents are the ones that can make the biggest difference, especially with young children, of course. Another article I read talked about different styles of mediation that parents can use. One was posing restrictions on time and content. I'll just go through all of these really quick. The second one was discussing content and giving explanations or instructions as they watch or are involved in media. Number 3 was co-using the media intentionally with the child together. So you're watching with them, you're playing the computer game with them, you're right there with them. Number 4, supervision, like from another part of the room, you're just kind of paying attention to what they're doing. 5 would be monitoring the child's online activities afterward, like checking the browser history, that kind of thing. And number 6 was using technical restrictions, such as parental controls that are given that can block sites or block times or whatever. And then it also discusses the difficulties with these different mediations. First of all, I was thinking of myself and I was like, I have probably used all of those at different times. And I think that's probably the key, is to use them all appropriately at different times when needed. So back to the difficulties that can happen with any mediation would be the limit of time, limit of money to implement technical resources. It's suggested when you have large families, sometimes it's really hard to control that with everybody because they're all going different directions. Lack of parental skill with media is a problem. And the number of electronic devices in your home can also cause problems if you have a lot of them. So that came up with a lot of the mediation. I've used all of them at different times, like I said, and they can be helpful and they can have a lot of holes that are not covered too. So I think you have to use a lot of them at the same time. That's fine.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I can go next.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So I chose to focus on self-esteem. So self-esteem is a crucial key in parenting. Good self-esteem is, of course, great for everybody, and I would hope everybody would have it, but it's especially important in kids. It helps with their attachment, their likelihood of trying new things, and it helps determine how they'll develop as they age. So one of the sources I was looking at talked about self-esteem and what it means for children with and without high self-esteem. For example, kids who have a healthy self-esteem tend to feel valued, feel confident, and feel that they have an ability to do what's expected of them. Whereas kids with lower self-esteem are self-critical, hard on themselves, insecure, and doubt their ability to do well in things. It also talked about how self-esteem is developed. I know that I personally thought kind of it came a little bit more through like the constant praise and just feeling recognized. And that's like a part of it, but it really comes when they feel capable, effective, and accepted. And it also talked about how parents can help nurture self-esteem in their children, which would be the three things I mentioned, feeling capable, effective, and accepted. So it talked about being a support system for the child and a good role model for them. As parents, we should show and tell them what to do and then let them try it for themselves and support them through their efforts, even if they make mistakes. Um, it recommended praising them for their efforts and not just a quality that they have. It said not to overpraise them and that we needed to focus on their strengths. My other resource, golfbend.org, also recommends some of these same tactics, but it adds the importance of the child's peers, saying that if the kids are constantly teased or left out, they have lower self-esteem. So we need to help kids get involved with each other and be including everybody. So we could start implementing some programs to help kids make friends and create bonds, or just within our family, kind of challenge, the kids to do different things like include others or talk to a new person every day. I know that when I was in, I believe, middle school, my ward kind of challenged us as the youth to do that, to like talk to people or at least smile at people like once a day, and then like sit next to people who looked lonely at lunch. And so that was really kind of interesting, and I'll go into that in a little bit. So golfbend.org, my other resource, discussed resilience in children, saying that some kids are so resilient that they could thrive in an environment where they're being negatively affected, but it doesn't really affect their self-esteem or emotional development. But if we feel like our child doesn't seem to be as resilient as those kids, I think as long as we're supporting them and loving them, it shows them that they matter, and they know that we're always going to be there for them as their parents. So both of these readings I found kind of talked about the importance of supporting our children. So for implementation, as I said, we were encouraged in our ward to really kind of step up to the challenge of talking to people and smiling and sitting next to people. And so it was really discouraging when the first person that I tried to sit with thought that I was really weird for coming over and sitting with them. And so they actually got up and left me to sit by myself. But I actually had my friends to go back and sit with. So I kind of was like, hey, maybe I won't go to people. So I kind of opened up the challenge to my friends as well. And I was like, hey guys, I think that we should, maybe start inviting new people to come and sit with us. And so it kind of opened up the challenge a little bit more. And so I tried to do that. And then I tried to smile at people and talk to new people that I hadn't talked to before, because it was hard because I was a shy middle schooler myself. So it was definitely out of my comfort zone. However, that was in the past. So recently, once we got this assignment, I tried to implement it in my dealings with kids. All I do is babysit. And so 2 days ago, I was actually babysitting this little girl. And I feel that she struggles with self-esteem because I've actually been babysitting her for a while. And so when I got over there, I noticed that she was trying to do something, but she was really struggling. And she kind of like threw it down and walked away because she was just kind of done with it. And like her mom was getting ready to leave, so she couldn't really do anything. And there was just a really stressful like environment when I kind of got there. So I walked over to her and I was just like, hey, like, why don't we come back and let's try it again? And like, I'll just kind of give you a little bit of guidance, like it said, to show or tell them what to do. And so she let me do that and she listened. And then although she didn't really want to, she kind of half-heartedly still tried. But even in her half-hearted tries, I was still like, you're doing a great job. And I was encouraging her and really trying to get her to try harder. And I noticed that it was working. And so she would really try harder. And I noticed that her attitude was just definitely different by the end of the activity than it was when I first came in. And so it was great and really encouraging to me. That was like my positive reinforcement to see her attitude shift so drastically just by my doing something as simple as saying good job. So I thought that was really interesting. It's interesting what really affects kids.
That's
That was
awesome.
my study I found.
That's an example. Holy cow.
So
It's great.
I don't know who wants to go next.
Annalise, do you have a preference?
I don't care. I can go.
Okay.
So I talked about, or I researched about anxiety. Well, I didn't know how specific I had to be. So I said like anxiety and social emotional disorders, but I really just focused on anxiety in young children. and it's pretty like we all kind of know what it is, but I looked it up and it said like it's defined more as like it's becoming a bigger problem with children today. Let's start out with that. Than it is in the past. Like children are just generally more anxious, and I really feel like it's kind of what you were talking about on how they're not outside a lot, but that's another side tangent, I guess. But it can be defined as like extreme anxiousness or nervous emotions that a person has when confronted or placed in an uncomfortable, unfamiliar situation. So children can have a hard time like coping or adjusting to new things or unexpected changes. And one of the sources that I found is from the Child Institute, and they had a lot of good information about this, not only in how anxiety is like displayed in children, but also how it's misdiagnosed a lot of times for other like behavioral disorders, I guess, or like struggles, I guess. I don't know the right word to say. So sometimes like when we think of children, we think or a child with anxiety, they might be clingy. And they are a lot of times like that is like a way that children kind of can show anxiety, but also like another way is also in that they kind of like fight back. It's kind of like that flight or fight response. So some children just kind of flee and go try and find a comfort zone, whereas other children can kind of fight back. And it can be misplaced for like behavioral issues or being angry when really they're just overwhelmed or anxious. So they had like a lot of good information about that and how to kind of tell the differences. One of the things they said is that like a child who appears oppositional or aggressive may be reacting to anxiety that he can't articulate. So because of this, like they're often misdiagnosed. And so that was interesting, like in the classroom, because children, or when teachers are aware of that, they can treat children differently and kind of look at the situation holistically and see like if they have anxiety or if this is really a behavioral issue, you know, like what's the root cause of like how in the way that they're reacting or the behavior that they show. So a different study noted that anxiety is higher in Asian American populations, as well as higher in girls than it is in boys, which I thought was interesting. I figured that it was higher in girls than boys. I think I've heard that before, but I didn't know about the Asian American populations, and it was interesting to read. It explained like some of the factors involved in that, which were really unique, I guess. It talked about like different home lives and how they're treated in school and just different things. In another study, they analyzed the relationship between children with anxiety and their parents' reactions. And this is where I found like a lot of the interventions, because they looked at how like if parents were warm, if they gave autonomy to the child, or if they were controlling, or if they kind of like showed a rejection towards the child's behavior. So like an example might be if like their child was uncomfortable in a situation, like they kind of freaked out or got anxious and they reacted by like crying. If a parent was to like comfort the child, or rather being like, hey, stop crying, you know, like you're fine, it's fine. And how that child like essentially turned out. So they found that like, obviously, I don't know, this seems pretty obvious that children who, or parents that reacted in more negative ways, with like low warmth, low autonomy, rejection, the children's anxious behaviors actually like compounded and were worse, and they weren't able to develop like coping mechanisms, or effective ones at least. So it opened my eyes to see that like really parents do have like a very large impact and influence on their children's anxiety and like the way that they cope with it and how well they can like overcome it. So that was like one of the bigger interventions. I didn't like work with any kids this week that had anxiety, but like coping strategies are really important, and that showed in that study in like parents that can provide good coping strategies and teach their children who have anxiety like how to calm down and like self-calm and and teachers and parents who can recognize when a child is like overwhelmed or is feeling anxious and kind of like give appropriate responses, not necessarily to fix it, but to help them work through it. And so that they can overcome or they can cope in healthy ways rather than like either fleeing or fighting back with possible like behavioral problems. So I guess it's like a little narrow part of anxiety, but that's what I found on it. So
Nice.
Yeah, that was insightful.
Yeah.
good.
Okay, guys. Well, I had chosen to focus on empathy. And then, so yeah, I don't know. This was really interesting to me because I have personal experience with it. So it defined empathy as like the child's ability to take another person's perspective in order to understand what they're feeling. And so just like anything else, that also develops over time. One thing I thought was interesting from mentalhealth.net, one of the sources, was that it said that children's ability to feel empathy depends on cognitive and their language development, which I thought was actually, it makes a lot of sense because so the personal experience that I have is in my preschool class, we had a child who had autism. And so already there's a cognitive problem there, which is interesting because it says that depending on their cognitive will depend on how they develop empathy and stuff like that. So it made sense because he would do things he didn't understand language very much. Basically, the only way you could communicate with him was by modeling something physically, and that is if you could get him to look at you. And so one thing he would often like go up to other preschoolers in the class and he would take a toy that they were playing with, or he would throw something at them, or kind of like push them out of the way to get to do something that they were doing because he wanted to do it. And so he wasn't aware. I mean, obviously that hurt the other children's feelings and they'd be sad and they didn't understand because they could tell he was different, but they didn't really get why. And so we worked at trying to get him to recognize the feelings that what his actions, the consequences. And so what we tried to do was try to like start making eye contact with him, and then we would physically model. We'd say, "Oh, look, like this dinosaur, this was her dinosaur. Look, it made her sad when you took her dinosaur." And kind of just like, like really animated facial expressions like big frowns and stuff like that. And eventually, I mean, it took a long, long time. It's taken 2 semesters, but he's starting to understand. And I think that the cognitive part of him understanding what's going on is allowing him, that's progressing too. So it's allowing him to feel empathy and to feel sorry and to feel bad for hurting another child or for hurting their feelings. So I really enjoyed learning about that because it makes perfect sense. And it applied perfectly. So that was something that the first article I read about. And then the second one I kind of researched was just kind of giving tips on how parents can teach their children empathy. And it suggested that you could read stories that talk about feelings. You can empathize with the child when things happen in your home. Talk about other things with them. So just kind of even saying, hey, like she looks kind of sad right now. Why do you think she feels that way? Instead of just kind of letting things go, just talking them out. They talked about using iMessages, which is when you, instead of saying you did this, you say, I don't like when you do this because it hurts my feelings. Or you say I, and then how it makes you feel, and then why. And then I thought a really good one was to validate the child's feelings. It's just to make sure, like, help them understand that their feelings are important. And once they understand that they're a person and they have feelings and theirs are important, they can understand that there are other people, that they are their own people and that they have feelings and they may be different and that's okay and they can understand them. And then just to be patient with them as they're learning, obviously. But yeah, and then it just talked about some milestones in empathy, like having a secure relationship with a parent is important to help the child feel accepted. Social referencing, which is when a child will look to a parent to see their reaction to a person or a situation. And then it's just they're developing a theory of mind, which is just the understanding of like, I am a person, I have my own thoughts, and there are other people that have their own thoughts. So That's basically what I got from that.
Nice.
That's cool.
That's cool.
I would have never thought to think, like, consider that, I guess, as
Yeah.
a domain. So
Right.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That was definitely cool. I like learning more about all of those things. Alrighty, so now in kind of like these last 15 to 20 minutes, sorry, I don't know if you want to kind of to just time this.
We have
Um,
6 minutes left, just so you know.
okay, cool. So, just in these last, couple 15 to 20 minutes, we are supposed to attempt to identify common elements of effective interventions to different problems in different domains. So we'll just kind of do that, and then when it seems that we've kind of reached the end, I'll kind of just say this last part, I guess. Well, not the last part, but the next bullet point.
Mhm.
So, I definitely feel like, especially like in mine, kind of like I pointed out, that like support is definitely an effective intervention. And I feel like that is definitely something that spreads across all domains, because if the child doesn't feel, supported, they're not going to want to try and progress and fix things and work on the problem at hand, because especially if we're talking about like 2 to 5 year olds, they might not even know that they're doing anything wrong. So I feel like once we point it out, but then still give them the support of it, it just will definitely help the situation.
Very good.
One that I noticed seemed kind of common between ours was just kind of being a role model. That parents and teachers and whoever is interacting with the children can set an example for them, because as they see us maybe handling our own feelings, or reflecting others' feelings, those kind of things, I think that they're able to understand, and just, I don't know, just learning from example is great. Children learn by doing, they learn from seeing, so that was a good one.
And to go along with what you both said, I think a parent and a teacher, depending on what situation you're in, they just need to be aware and to be watching and to know what's happening in order to be able to support and to empathize and to help them. They have to just be aware. Sometimes we get tied up in our own little minds and we forget to watch what's going on with them. They need that. They need us to pay attention to what's going on.
Okay, sorry. And so before we move any further, I actually just realized that I skipped something. Apparently, I'm the best moderator. We're supposed to share the highlights from our domain interviews from lesson 11. So I don't know if we want to just kind of go in the same order of just presenting our social domain intervention. So I don't know if we want to go Leilani, me, and then Annalise, and then Sarah.
That works.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
I ought to pull up that.
Yeah, sorry. I was like, wait, that didn't seem right, because I was like looking at it while like you guys were talking, and then I was like, okay, remember to say that, and then I forgot. So, Sarah,
I
you're
was gonna ask you
Okay.
afterwards. No worries, I got you.
Oh yeah, that is totally what we do, right?
No worries.
Okay, so I'll talk about the first person. First, she's actually a teacher, so she is aware of a lot of things that go on in the school and stuff. And she thought about the main risks being, first she thought about injuries with like sports participation and things. And then when you talk about cognitive, she hoped that more testing would be done to catch on to cognitive problems early. She doesn't think that that's done enough. And if services aren't offered early enough, they become overwhelmed playing catch up later, and it's just really hard. The social risks that she has seen include like bullying and not being accepted. And she's also seen some kids not be given enough positive affirmation by their parents. And that leads to other problems. And I was just going to go on to where she was talking about who should be responsible. She said absolutely she thinks it should come to the parents. However, the reality is lots of times parents aren't equipped to do as much as they need to be doing. And so it's nice to have advocates available at school and in local offices that parents can go to with questions. And I thought that was really interesting. I also talked to my sister on the phone. She has 10 children, so she's got a lot of experience.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah. And she's still in the middle of it too, so she
Wow.
understands, you know. And her youngest is like 9, but still, she still remembers how it all is. But her biggest concern, I think, was thinking of the downfall of the family and how when we don't have the strong families to help and the strong family support, that's when kids have a lot of issues in all the different areas. She also, because she has, her husband is a school teacher, she thinks the No Child Left Behind program has been a huge problem. And that teachers in the school have had to concentrate on the lowest kids, and they forget about or aren't able to work with the kids that are in the middle or in the upper levels. They're expecting people to stay at this lower and just working with them. And it leaves out a lot of kids, and it kind of lowers the outcome for all the kids because they're not expecting as much from them. What else? So I liked what she said about who is in charge of making sure interventions happen. And she says that changes as age changes. So as young, the parent should be intervening. And then the older they get, it adjusts from parents to teachers or trusted adults, and then on to, you know, the children being needing to take care of themselves and watch for themselves and figure out what they can do. They should intervene for themselves a lot of time as they get older. But she said it just depends on the situation and how old they are. That changes as their life situation changes. So I liked what they both had to say from different perspectives. It was really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good points.
Oh, where'd it go? Okay, there. Okay. So for mine, so I really liked interviewing the caregivers, and I really kind of like what I chose. I was kind of in a similar boat. I interviewed a teacher and then I interviewed a mom. So they did have like different ideas of what could be like risks and problems, but for the most part, it seemed like they were kind of on the same page and like understanding where the other was coming from. So, I feel like I noticed that the teacher knew a couple more like developmental risks than the mom did. Just because the teacher would have had to have at least had some kind of study in it for their schooling. And so, like, the teacher mentioned attachment issues being a social problem for children because she's the one that has to deal with the kid crying over how they want their mom, whereas the mom is already gone by the time the child really starts getting into their fit. And so I feel like when I kind of like gave my perspective on the responsible parties and just how to like work with it and stuff like that, that their ideas mixed really well with it. And I just feel like it really created some good ideas. And it was interesting to see that the mom kind of like agreed with the teacher on like when they were the responsible party, because you think that kind of in that situation the one might be like, well, you're the responsible party, but it's like they weren't really like blaming each other. They're just kind of noting like this is the responsible party, but then they also kind of noticed that they could like work together. So it's like for things like attachment, that's something that the parent could work on, but then things like learning to read and write is something that they both should work with the child on, because those kind of habits and necessities aren't things that the kid can learn in just one place, which is home or school, and not the other. They need to be learning it in both, and the teachers and the parents need to be putting in the effort to do so.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I thought that was interesting.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I talked to my sister-in-laws, and one of them's a mom, and well, they're both moms, I guess. But one of them is a nurse practitioner, and they both had really good responses. One of them came up with like a lot of the ones that I kind of thought of or had like considered, but then my sister-in-law, who's a nurse practitioner, she came up with like some that I would have never thought of ever in my life. Like it just didn't even cross my mind. Like she brought up like abduction during like the physical one. And I would have never thought about that. Anyways, so she focused a lot more on like screening tools just because like that's what she knows. And she brought up like a lot of interventions that I wasn't aware of that have already been established. Because like she's constantly like giving these like references or resources to parents. So there's a lot of things that like I hadn't thought about. But she mentioned like how people with education need to share it. So like a lot of the responsibility does fall on the parents, but for things like screening sometimes where parents might not be aware of it, then like people that are like parents or not parents, educators or doctors or healthcare providers kind of need to carry more of that weight in recognizing those things in like well child checks and stuff. So that was just interesting because a lot of it I would have thought would have just referred to the parents. But she said, let's see, they both mentioned like a lot of better screening, like recognition of like guidelines and milestones so parents know like what to watch for in different things. And just education being a big one to help people see like the different things that should be happening at the age and like different things that put children at risk, or like she mentioned drowning, I think, for one of them for physical, but she told me that like you could drown in like, I don't know, like an inch and a half of water or something like that, like a child can. And I didn't know that. Like it was just not something that I knew like a young child could drown in that much water. So I think like education on those type of things for parents, and then parents can start to take the weight of the responsibility in those things too. So yeah, kind of like what you said, there's like a balance of the responsibility, I guess, in a lot of those issues.
Wow. Thanks for sharing, Annalise. Okay. I also interviewed a teacher and then a mom. And the teacher that I talked to, when we talked about risks, kind of, she was more worried. It was kind of similar to you, Leilani, where she was talking about like injuries and how they just like children are always on the go and they're always like they want to explore, they want to do things with their bodies and they're still learning and growing and developing, and so they just kind of like they get hurt naturally. It happens all the time. So that was kind of her number one for the physical. And let's see, for the social and emotional, it looks like she just said the same kind of thing, that they have accidents and then maybe getting hurt might make them sad. They wouldn't know how to handle that or something. For her, an intervention that she talked about was just kind of just being mindful of children as they're playing. Watch what they're doing, like monitor them. Don't like hover over them, but try and help them be safe at least. But what I thought was kind of more interesting was what the mom said. She was talking about, so her thought was obesity, which is interesting because that's what we decided to do our project over last week. But she just kind of talked about how there's a lot of let's see, they're struggling with obesity, and she thinks that leads to the social and emotional problems of like lower self-esteem, like we talked about earlier, and bullying. So some similar outcomes and other risks. And she said, okay, some of the interventions that we can go through is just kind of that children's responsibility, or not children, sorry, parents' responsibility of what their children are eating. Just giving them good options, and like Annalise said, like presenting to them multiple times so they can decide like if they really like it or if they don't. Not just giving up and not taking the easy way out. Maybe going to the farmer's market, like Lauren mentioned, and just kind of really, actually, there's something I learned about in my nutrition class for young children this semester. Is kind of about like what my teacher called the division of responsibility, which is when it's the parents' roles in feeding their children and then like the child's role. And basically, the child's role is to eat as much food as their body needs and to learn to eat as their parents eventually, until the person, the body that they're supposed to be. The parent is in charge of everything else, which is providing, setting up, having a regular routine mealtime, stuff like that. And we talked about those things. And she was like, yeah, she thinks that the more that parents are involved in how their children are eating, especially children that like super young, going to preschool and kindergarten and grade school, stuff like that, they eat at least a meal at school and sometimes snacks. So just kind of like being a part of making sure that they're eating well and eating enough or not eating too much, kind of stuff like that. And then about who should be responsible, she kind of said, I think that it's both parents and teachers, whoever's kind of caring for the child is kind of in charge of what they're eating. And so, yeah, those were the main highlights from that interview. So we have 11 minutes left.
Cool. Okay. So, I mean, we kind of talked about it, but just now that we kind of had the final part in it, I kind of noticed some other like common elements. And then if anybody has kind of any like final thoughts about that, we can share those and then move on. But I kind of found that kind of giving giving the child the opportunity to do something and then just kind of letting them have their independence to do it, but still like at least being there for them, whether it's like before, during, or after, kind of like what, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm trying to say. So like what I was saying, like you show and tell a child what to do, and then you let them try, and you give them their independence to try, and they can do it your way, or they can even try and do it like their own way. But they're going to try and follow like your role, kind of like what we talked about and Sarah mentioned with the role model. And then with what Leilani said about the media, like you're kind of watching as they're doing media, and then you're just kind of there supervising and like as they play, like Sarah mentioned, and then just being there like after, like if bullying or if they have some kind of anxiety issue, like Annalise was mentioning, just kind of giving them the coping mechanisms and helping them cope after it's happened. So I feel like being there for them at some point in time during something, but letting them be independent in it as well was definitely an effective intervention that seemed to be mentioned a lot.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You don't want to like fix it for him like automatically, but like being there to like support and scaffold, I guess.
Yeah.
It's good for their learning.
That's good.
Okay. So now so it just says conclude by sharing our best general insight or suggestion about effectively intervening to foster optimum development. I mean, that sounds a little interesting because I feel like identifying the common elements, which I feel like we did a really good job of, is kind of like our best insight of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if anybody wants to add any kind of thing. I mean, I feel like our interventions were kind of effective in fostering development.
I think that was good.
Yeah, like being aware and doing what you can,
Yeah, definitely.
I
Being
think
aware is
overall,
definitely important.
I think like overall as being like a parent, like being a parent that kind of seeks out that information and wants to help their kid, like there's those parents that read books. Have you ever, I don't know, someone told me this one time that like the parents that read books about parenting are like better parents, not necessarily because they like read the books, but just because they care. So they like want like their kids to succeed, and I think like that same thing like applies as we're trying to like help children succeed, whether we work with them or we're their parents. The more we learn and like want to learn to help them is like what's really gonna benefit them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess
One thing sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to wrap it up, but if you have a comment.
Just one thing that I thought of just while you were talking was, I think we need to be, as parents, not afraid to ask for help, not afraid to learn more all the time. There's always something new coming up.
Yeah, very true.
We don't know.
Very true. Yeah. So I guess technically to like combine that all together, we could just be like putting an effort in, because I guess to do all the effective interventions, you have to want to put the effort in. Like you can't be like, I'm going to have this child and I'm just going to be a parent. Like you have to put the effort into, like of course a lot of it's going to be like thinking on your feet, because you may read one thing in a child book, but your child may do the exact opposite.
Yes.
So, but you just have the effort of forming a basis of kind of where to go. And so I guess that would kind of be our general insight of effectively intervening. Alrighty. So I don't know who wants to do it or if we just want me to do it. I I don't know if like Annalise, you want to do it, since technically like Leilani's recording and probably going to turn it in, and then Sarah was timing, and then I'm kind of the moderator. If you kind of want to maybe summarize the highlights from our discussions, or if somebody else wants to do it, that's
Sure.
just a suggestion.
I can highlight. Yeah, that's
You
good.
got
I
it.
don't know how like in depth this has to be. Does it have to be really in depth?
I mean, I don't think so. It said just in 2 minutes, so I don't think we can get so in depth in 2 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know. So we talked about like our different our presentation, which we went over, which was about obesity and some of the different risks that are associated and different things that are related to obesity, as well as like interventions that we could use in the community and with parents. And let's see, we each discussed our different like issue that we picked for the emotional domain, which one was like media. So we went over like the different things about media and how it can be like inappropriate and overused, and how that affects children, and some of the different ways that we can like mitigate the effects or decrease the influence of media on children. We also talked about self-esteem and how crucial that is for children and their development of like later things like attachment and willingness to try new things. We talked about empathy and like how to develop or how to help children develop empathy and take on like others' perspectives because it's something that they kind of have to learn slowly. And we also talked about anxiety. Yeah, I was like, that's my topic. And how children can like develop better coping mechanisms for anxiety and how we can facilitate that rather than be like a detriment to them. Then we talked about the different highlights of the interviews that we had. And it was just interesting to see like different people's views, whether they were like a mom or a school teacher or like wherever they came from, or like healthcare. They all kind of had like unique things relating to like development and
Excuse me.
some interesting perspectives on like the like who takes the responsibility, and people seem to like generally agree, whether it was parents or another person that was responsible or best equipped party to provide intervention. And I'm trying to think what else we talk about, guys. Yeah, and then we just talked about kind of like some of the good interventions that we could use, or the key points of this lesson, I guess, overall, and things that we could implement in our own lives as when working with children to help them with like optimal development. I don't know if that was good enough, but
Yeah, that's great.
okay.
Perfect.
Count it.
Alrighty. Well, then, with those great closing statements, that is the end of our meeting. So, is this our last meeting for the class?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Alrighty.
Good job, guys.
Yeah, good job. I really liked all the work that we all did and handed in. I feel like we worked really well together. So, thanks, guys, for being such a great group. I hope you guys have a good finals week next week. Good luck on all your finals, and good luck in your future semesters or whatever you do. So, yeah, so thanks for coming and participating and dealing with my brain farts, because apparently I can't speak tonight. So, but it was nice meeting with you guys and seeing all your guys' lovely faces, because I feel like at least I haven't seen you guys really before. So, nice names to faces. So, yeah. Well, thank you guys so much.
We'll see ya.
Alrighty, have a good night. Bye.
Have a great week. Bye.